if we're honest, it's pretty easy to forget what we're celebrating this time of year. I know for me, with all of the lights, easily distracted, glitter, bows, wrapping paper, it's pretty easy to wade through, not wade through all of that and remember what we're really celebrating. My wife was having a conversation with a coworker last week, and they were talking about some of the traditions that we're doing with our kids of trying to, help celebrate Christmas. In some healthy ways. And one of the things that we're doing is we're going through this book. It's 25 kind of chapters, and each day has a symbol with it. And there's a little tree with some ornaments on it. So each day is a story, mostly Old Testament stories, and kind of leading up. So it's got an Advent feel to it. And she's explaining this to her coworker on how we're doing this. And the coworker's like nodding her head. Yeah, we're doing kind of the same thing. We're doing a kind of a calendar and working our way up. And as Bree continued to describe it to her coworker's demeanor changes a little bit because they realize they're not really talking about the same thing. And she's like, well, ours doesn't really have any like Bible stories in it at all. Like, it doesn't really mention like Jesus in it at all. Like, what's Advent? Like, what are you even talking about? And Bree, who thought that they were talking about the same thing and had kind of a shared tradition there, was asking me, like, what are you talking about? Like we thought we were doing the same thing, but if it's not, like, what is your thing that you're going through with your kid? And she said, well, it's a Mickey Mouse 25 Days of Christmas book, which Bree was like, I didn't even know existed. And I'm not saying if you got that and you're like, we're doing that, like, don't. But it's pretty easy to get lost in this tradition versus this tradition and doing this versus this. And, to just stop and even ask the question, like, what are we even celebrating? We were watching one of my favorite Christmas movies the other night, The Muppets Christmas Carol. Anybody fans, all right? We're Disney Plus and all the Muppets stuff's on there, The Muppets Christmas Carol. And I'm starting to watch it kind of through the eyes of my 5-year-old now and thinking, for one, like, we've got to skip a pretty large section that's just a giant Grim Reaper, right? Like, that's kind of terrifying for a little. We're going to fast forward to that, and then it's Christmas morning. And one thing that I'm just kind of noticing as we're teaching him, like, the meaning of Christmas and celebrating Jesus' birthday, as we're walking through, as we're watching this movie, I'm just like, they're not saying anything about Jesus. Now, I'm not going to the Muppets for theology. Like, I'm not expecting them to do that. That's not why we were watching that. But I was just kind of listening in different ways. And I did hear one mention in the movie. It's when Tiny Tim comes home from church, and they're talking about, Tiny Tim says he was glad that he was able to be at church so that they would remember the one who makes the sick well and the lame to walk. And that was really the only mention of any sort of biblical tie in there. It's pretty easy to forget what we're celebrating because we talk a lot about the spirit of Christmas and the feeling of Christmas, and it's the most wonderful time of the year. And it's what we tend to do because we just want to wrap everything in lights and paper because we just want 3 days or a week or just a holiday season to be just that. To be just a holiday. Like, I want to turn off all of the craziness of the world and just enjoy some peace and just enjoy a second where I want the 24-hour news cycle. Can we just mute that for a second? Can we just press pause on the politics and the school pickup line and the emails and the phone calls and the bills and just cover everything in almond bark and give me a break, right? Like, let's just chill out for a second. It's the holidays. And it's very tempting to forget all of that stuff this time of year, but it's not really that helpful. I'm going to make that case today. It's, in fact, the chaos of the world and the mess of the world that helps us see the exact reason why we celebrate the coming of Jesus. It's the exact reason why the song says that Jesus was a thrill of hope to a weary world that rejoices. If we're not careful, our nativity scene will start to look a little too perfect, and we might just forget the chaos of the world that Jesus was born into. We might just forget that since Genesis chapter 3, that there has been a mess of a world. There has been a sin problem in this world. And if you forget just how big of a mess that it actually is, if we just tune that out for the holidays, you might forget the reason for the whole celebration. It was a dark, chaotic world that Jesus was born into. About 30 years before the birth of Jesus, a king was placed in Judea. Now, I say placed in Judea because when you think back to the kings of Judea in the Old Testament, there was a system and there was an anointing and all of that. That's all been gone for quite some time now. It had been about 400 years since God had spoken to his people through a prophet or through a priest or through a king. And 400 years now, and the king that was placed, Herod, or some of you might know him as Herod the Great, to the Jews would not be known as great. He would definitely not be remembered as a godly man. You see, Herod became king only a few years after, or a few years before, Caesar Augustus would take control as dictator and ruler over the newly forming Roman Empire. Herod was only half Jewish, as many kings and dictators of the time, and even today, his life was ruled by a paranoia. You see, they rule everything in their life, but the only thing that scares them is that somebody else could come and take that rule from them. And this is what really drove Herod's life and really drove him mad. He was only half Jewish, and that didn't bode well for being the king of Judea. History tells us that he kept thousands of bodyguards to protect him and his throne. When coming into power, he rounded up 45 of the most wealthy people in all of Judea and had them murdered and took all of their wealth, just in case powerful people with money wanted to take his spot. He had 10 wives, and this is not a marriage series, but not a good look, right? He had 10 wives. They all had children. The most powerful of those children, the most influential of those children, he had murdered because they had a direct access to the throne. He murdered 3 of his sons. And if that weren't bad enough, he executed his second wife and his mother-in-law. And Matthew gives us the account that he was so paranoid that the anointed one had come, that Jesus had come to take his throne in Judea, although we know that Jesus came to rule much more than just Judea. But he was so paranoid that he had every baby boy in all of Jerusalem killed. One of the craziest stories that is actually proved in history, it was a plan of his that actually failed. He wasn't a popular guy in Judea. As a matter of fact, it seemed like it was going to be more of a party when Herod died than it was going to be like a mournful funeral. So he set up a plan that upon his death, they were to round up all of the Jewish leaders and bring them into an arena or a coliseum and have a slaughter fest and have them murdered, essentially to give the people of Judea something to cry about on the day that he died. These are not the stories you find in your children's Bible stories, right? These are not the stories you sit around and you tell in detail this time of year. Herod overtaxed the people he claimed to represent. He spent the tax money on lavish gifts for the Roman Empire and fortifying the city for his own personal protection. He prohibited protest. He removed anyone who opposed him by force. His kingdom was divided with huge gaps economically, racially, politically. And we can look at these Bible stories sometimes and we can gloss over all of these hard topics. We can gloss over the mess that the world was in, the killing, the corruption, the racism, the religious persecution, the immigration, the wars, the dictators. And we can look back at the Bible, and we can look at Matthew, and we can look at Luke chapter 2, and we can think it was such a simpler time. I mean, we'll sing songs like Silent Night, Holy Night, O little town of Bethlehem, how still we see you lie there. And we know that from history that the world that Jesus was born into was not silent. The world that Jesus was born into, a little perspective shows us that it was in pain. The little town of Bethlehem where the baby was born was soon to be a place for baby funerals. The silent night was to be interrupted by an evacuation to Egypt where Mary and Joseph would take Jesus to Egypt. Now, if you know your history and your Exodus history, think about a Jewish couple fleeing to Egypt to get away. Political chaos, religious chaos, racial chaos, long lay the world in sin and error pining. This world was not filled with caroling. This world was filled with chaos. It was a mess. But into that darkness, a light shines. Into that mess, Jesus is born. Into this world of darkness, a political, power-hungry, paranoid world, this backstabbing world that we see, and we just looked at what Herod did. We didn't bring it out to the whole kingdom. But Jesus was born. You know, Isaiah would write about this moment of Jesus being born nearly 700 years before Jesus was born. And here's how he describes it. Isaiah chapter 9, verses 1 and 2. This is from this is from the Voice translation. So if you're looking in your Bible going like, what is he reading? Like, it'll be up here for you. But there will be no more gloom for those who knew such hardship. In times of the past, God humbled the land of Zebulun and Naphtali. Later, he will restore honor and glory to the way of the sea and the land beyond the Jordan, Galilee, home of the nations. It continues, the people who have been living in darkness have seen a great light. The light of this life has shined on those who dwelt in the shadow of the darkness of death. See, the birth of Jesus is bringing light into this dark world. The birth of Jesus is bringing clarity into the mess and the chaos of the world that he was born into. But there's a thing about lights. There's this thing about lights. Like I have a 5-year-old at home, and over the course of a couple years since he's been home with us, we've collected a lot of flashlights. And I don't know if this is true for you guys who have little kids. Like they just find little things that they'll hoard or whatever. And this kid's like got 30 flashlights. And he can't ever find them, and they're always out of batteries. And when we do find them or whatever, so tons of batteries and tons of flashlights. But when he does find one, he likes to go and either like read under his blankets, or we'll build a fort, and he's in there with his flashlights. Just absolutely loves it. I love, that he's so curious about it, and he's trying to figure out the batteries and all that sort of stuff. But one thing is absolutely certain. The lights help him for sure. To see in the dark, to see under his blankets, like it's absolutely great. But one thing is for certain. If I come into a dark room where he has a flashlight, that's going directly to my eyes, right? Have you been there? Like, he's going to turn it on and say, Dad, look, I have a flashlight. And where's it going? Directly into my eyes. Like, shine it directly in my eyes. And that's the thing about light. Like, it can help you see things that are around you. It can be very helpful, or it can blind you. Like, it can just be pointed directly in your face and blind you. And that's true if we speak of Jesus coming into a dark world. It's going to be seen a couple different ways, from a couple different perspectives. It can be seen as this path to healing and this path to clarity, or it can be seen as blind. You see, the birth of Jesus can be a saving light or a blinding light, depending on your perspective. We'll see a couple perspectives that would see it as blinding light. Jesus comes into this dark world. For Herod, this was not a welcome light. This was an invasive light. This was a threat to the kingdom that Herod was sitting on or placed in. For him, it was a threat to this kingdom, this thing that he had built, this thing that he had to protect, and it was a threat to that kingdom. And Jesus is coming, and so he does everything that he can, just as he had the rest of his rule, everything that he can to snuff out this light, because it hit him in the face like a flashlight to the face. Now, for the Pharisees and the Sadducees, this was not a welcome light either. We're going to see all throughout the Gospels, this is not a welcome light. This is a threat to their religious traditions. Their religious traditions where they say, we've got a pretty good thing going here. We've kind of cornered the market on telling people what to do with religion and how to connect to God. And you're coming to change all that. God's coming to give direct access. No, we can't have that. So it was a threat to their religious traditions. Isaiah would write in verse 6, for unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. You may have sang this before and didn't realize it's in the Bible, just so you know. The government shall be on his shoulder. Was this a threat to the kingdom of Herod? Absolutely. Was this a threat to the religious traditions of the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the scribes? You better believe it. This baby boy, born of a virgin who's been promised for ages, is coming to shed light on the corruption of this world, its governments, its kingdoms, its empires, its religions. Well, who is he? Well, his name shall be called it. Everybody, wonderful. No, okay, all right. Not a lot of Handel fans in here, huh? So, he has a name. He has many names, actually, and Isaiah's going to give him. His name will be called the Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, and the Prince of Peace. And we could do a whole sermon series on just half a verse right here. All of these names, they mean so much. The Wonderful Counselor. I mean, this drives all the way into what we have living and dwelling inside of us with the Holy Spirit. The Mighty God, the Everlasting Father. But I want to focus specifically for our time on the Prince of Peace. The Prince of Peace. In a world that is a mess, Christ is the Prince of Peace. And maybe you've heard of the word shalom. We talk a lot about peace this time of year and shalom and peace on earth and sleep in heavenly peace. The angels sang for it. The world longed for it. And it's a longing that still lingers in our hearts today. World peace. Or maybe for you, it's just like, I just need a corner, like a room of peace in my house at this point of the year. You're just like, can I just give me my little slice of peace? The word most commonly used in our Bible for peace is the Hebrew word shalom. And you may have heard that word in other settings, like a greeting or something like that. And this word carried many meanings historically, but most importantly, revolving around peace and tranquility and absence of war or conflict. And all of those are accurate descriptions. But I think a lot of times we actually sell the word short because we haven't grown up in a Jewish culture and we don't understand kind of the intricacies of the Hebrew and whatever. And I actually don't either. We're going to do a short little Hebrew lesson here, but I'm learning alongside of y'all. But a lot of times when we think of peace and shalom, we think of like getting away from everything, sitting around a campfire, singing Kumbaya, or almost even like a 60s vibe. It was just like, yeah, everything's great. And we know like everything's not great, but we're going to just pretend everything's great and peace on earth. But that really sells the word short. Shalom it is deeper than ignoring problems. It's actually eliminating problems. The actual Hebrew word for shalom looks like this. Okay, you with me still? Okay, don't tune me out here. Now, remembering that Hebrew is read from the right to the left is very confusing when you're trying to type things out in your notes because the Word document wants to like you to keep typing this way, and I want to type that way, and I get very confused. So if I mess this up, I apologize again. There's 4 Hebrew letters that make up the word shalom. The first is shin, the second is lamed, the third is vav, and then the fourth being mem. I'm going to give you kind of the definitions of those letters, okay? So each letter actually would have a meaning kind of behind it, and so you put all those meanings together, we can really get an understanding of what shalom really means. So the first word, all the way, go back. We're not ready. Don't give away the answer. Spoilers, you fast riders already got it. So we're going to go all the way over here to the right side and look at that very first letter, which is shin. Shin meant this. It means this, to have the teeth or the power to crush and destroy. The teeth or power, teeth that crush and destroy. And you can almost kind of see it. Hebrew's a pictorial language, so you can kind of see some like a lower jaw, like teeth in there. So you see kind of the teeth. Okay, so the teeth are power to crush and destroy. The second, the lamed, right here, meant it was like a shepherd's staff. And in the original kind of hieroglyphic version of Hebrew, it literally just looked like a hook. Okay, but this lamed, this in modern Hebrew, was a shepherd's staff, which meant there was an authority or a leading. He leads me beside still waters. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. That's what a shepherd had to kind of keep the sheep in line. The last one, the third one here, this vav, was a nail or a hook, and that meant to connect something to something else. That's what you use nails for. You have a board to a board, and that's what that letter kind of connects to. So in a word, you would see, if you saw that, it meant to connect to something. And then finally, mem, which meant water, which could mean a quiet stream. It could mean a quiet stream, but more often it meant chaos, like a tsunami or a flood, because waters are untamable. Waters are unpredictable. That's why you didn't just go out onto a sea when a storm was coming up. You had to know what was coming up in the weather, so you didn't just find yourself in an unpredictable situation. And so if you take all of these letters and you smash them together in the word shalom, here's the sentence that you could make with it. Shalom means this: having the teeth or the power to destroy the authority of chaos. Having the teeth or the power to destroy the authority of chaos. When you break down those letters, this. So when we read in the scriptures the word Prince of Peace, it would look like this in the Hebrew. The Prince of Peace would look like this. And you can see the teeth and the teeth. You're essentially saying this: the authority that has the authority and the power to destroy the authority of chaos. I know, it's like a lot in just one word. That's not going to fit in Handel's Messiah, right? Too many syllables there. But to have the authority, so who has the authority and the power to destroy the authority of chaos? It's the Prince of Peace. And when we call him the Tsar of Shalom, which is how it would be read, the Tsar of Shalom, he has the power to destroy the authority of chaos. To this point in history, in a world of chaos and political unrest and social and spiritual uneasiness, is born the Prince of Peace, Jesus, the authority who has the power to destroy the unrest and to destroy the chaos. We see in the Gospels he has the power to calm the seas. He has the power to calm the water and the chaos. He's coming to us. So can we look at that and can we feel that 2,000 years later? Can we still feel that Jesus brought into a weary world that was causing it to rejoice? Jesus comes to calm this chaos. Or a better question is there a need, as you sit here this morning, for some chaos to be destroyed in your life? I saw a baby dedication. They said that they had multiple kids in the house. Multiple baby dedications and multiple kids. Is there some chaos in your life at this Christmas time or just in your world that needs some destroying? Is there a need today for the chaos of your life to be given over to an authority that can actually destroy it? Because I don't know if you've noticed this, parents, grandparents, but when there's like chaos in the home and you add like more like authority to it, like you yell at it, it usually doesn't immediately like go, oh yeah, okay. Like, we'll just chill out. Sorry, Dad, I didn't realize I was being so loud. No, it's usually like turns it up a notch. It seems like everything we come up with to destroy chaos makes more chaos. And so what have we done around this Christmas season? To destroy the chaos of the world, or to at least get away from it, we've created a whole nother ball of chaos, haven't we? I don't know if you've been to the mall. I wouldn't recommend it if you haven't. I don't know if you've driven on any road in Springfield. I wouldn't recommend it if you haven't. But it's like nobody's working this month, right? Like we're all just driving and angry. Everybody's just like, I just wanted to go to Walmart. It's like, well, so did everybody else wanted to go to Walmart. I just needed to get one thing. Well, everybody else just needed to get one thing. And so we're all just like creating more chaos, and that's not alleviating the chaos. And so here's a crazy thought. It seems too simple. It almost seems laughable. But have we considered inviting Jesus, the Prince of Peace, to Christmas this year? More than just a nativity or reading the Christmas story or more than a prayer before the meal, but actually inviting the Messiah, the Czar of Shalom, into the mess that we have created. What would it look like for a glorious light, not as a blinding light, but to bring clarity to our holiday season? Now, I'll warn you, once you start thinking like this, it kind of can seem like a flashlight to the face, because we have some things that we don't really realize are sacred to us. As with Herod, Christmas, thinking of Christmas, this light could come into your Christmas time. As with Herod, it could come as a threat to your kingdom, the kingdom that you have built. You might have to admit this year that there's not peace on earth, that there's not even peace in your car. There's not peace on earth. You might have to admit that there is not goodwill for all mankind and that there are some pretty messed up things going on in the world. And instead of hiding ourselves from it, instead of hiding under a Christmas tree and wrapping it all in lights, we have to admit that the empire that we have built, that we called Christmas to shield us from this mess of a world, is really just more chaos that we've piled on top of an already painful place. If you let the Prince of Peace into your celebration, you are admitting that there are some messes that we can't clean up on our own. There are some messes that a new tradition or a new traveling destination or a new vacation or a new something into the season is not going to fix. There are some hurts that wrapping paper can't cover. Jesus comes to shine a light on the good, the bad, and the ugly of our Christmas kingdom. Secondly, when you start thinking like this, inviting Jesus to Christmas, which kind of sounds crazy, like the Pharisees and the Sadducees, this might come as a threat to your religious traditions. Now, I'm going to be very careful talking about Christmas traditions because this has gotten me in trouble before, and that's just at home. So, like we've got to be careful. I don't want to tell you you're doing anything wrong, because I don't think we're doing anything wrong. I just want to be intentional about the things that we do. Honestly, most of our traditions aren't very religious. But our traditions cause more chaos. They just add to the chaos that we're actually saying that we're getting away from. One more Christmas party night. An ever-growing list of people that we forgot to invite. The cookies and the milk left out. The right elf on the right shelf. And I don't know how that works.
The halls decked, the floors swept, the wish list checked, every present wrapped, the movies watched, the miles driven, the stockings hung, the carols sung. Sounds like fun. And Jesus might just be coming in as a light to saying, what are we doing here? Like I said, it's kind of easy to forget what we're really celebrating here. I'll give you one practical tip. If you've got kids in your home and you really want them to grasp kind of the meaning of Christmas, one thing that's been really helpful for us, this is just like 3 days old for me. Like I just found this. But it was suggested to us by somebody, and we sat down and watched it. And if you're a fan of puppet shows, you're going to love it. But it was really, really helpful. So on Right Now Media, if you don't have Right Now Media, we can actually get you access to that. Send John an email. He would love to hear from you. And he will get you access. It's an online, it's like a Netflix for Bible studies, okay? They've got tons of children's stuff on there. And one of the things that we found just the other night, it's actually created, it's by the creator of VeggieTales, so Phil Vischer, and his company created this, is why we call it Christmas. And it's less than an hour long. You could sit there with your kids and you can watch it. It's got kind of almost maybe even a Muppet feel to it because there's puppets in it. It's really, really great. But they walk through some of these Christmas traditions that we all hold so dear. And trust me, it's not one of those things where you're going to get done and feel super convicted because you believe in Santa Claus. You're not going to be like super convicted because you practice this tradition or this tradition. It actually gives a lot of really rich religious background to a lot of these things that we do. And a lot of times we're just like, well, it's December 1st. We better get that tree put up. You ever wonder why we put a tree up? You need to watch Buck Denver, all right? He's going to tell you why, all right? So some of you are going to go home and watch this even though you don't have kids, and you're going to love it. You're going to laugh through it. My favorite part is when they talk about mistletoes, and it's like mistletoes. That's not tradition, but like missiles coming from your toes. It's really funny. So it's my favorite joke in the whole thing. But me and my 5-year-old have the same like sense of humor. So that's just one thing. Or just thinking about some of these ways where you can truly invite Jesus into your Christmas. Maybe it looks simpler. Maybe it looks just a little cleaner. Maybe it's a little less travel. Maybe it's a little less lights, a little less glitz and glamour and hustle and bustle. Like it's a little less. Maybe it's it's inviting the Prince of Peace to do what he comes to do. Because somewhere under all of this wrapping paper and lights of our kingdoms and our traditions, the one who is born to bring a better kingdom and a better tradition has come. Are we willing to give the authority over to the one who can actually destroy chaos and not create more of it? Because that light that shines in the ancient world, that comes into a world of darkness, that's the light that also shines into our darkness. When Jesus comes into our darkness, what does it look like in our Christmas season when Jesus shows up? Well, it probably looks a lot like the first time he showed up. If we're agreeing that like our world is a mess and their world was a mess, it probably looks a lot the same. And so out of the 4 Gospels, 2 of them give us the events surrounding Jesus' birth. 2 of them, Matthew specifically and Luke. Matthew and Luke give us very detailed versions of Jesus being born. Okay? Mark actually starts with John the Baptist. And so you fast forward a little bit, you start with John the Baptist. And then there's John, who's kind of an outlier, written much later than the other Gospels. It gives us a little less of the historical facts of Jesus coming, but gives us a little more of a theological perspective, a little broader perspective as to what's happening at Jesus' birth. And before we turn there, John chapter 1, verse 9, or as you're turning there, if you're a communion server for us this morning, you would go ahead and head back to get ready to serve us in communion. But John chapter 1, we see this light comes up again. So from Isaiah, and you fast forward all the way to John chapter 1, here's what John says. Here's how he starts his gospel. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his very own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave right to become the children of God. Children born not of natural descent or of human decision, but of a husband's will, or a husband's will, but born of God. When the world was a mess, dark, desperate, and chaotic, God sent a light. Not only a light to brighten up the world and to brighten up things around us, but to brighten up, to give a promise and a birthright and a belonging. The perfect Christmas present, the path to peace, knowing that this morning. We know that no matter what you did or did not accomplish in the eyes of the world this Christmas season, that you are a child of God. Or if you forgot to get so-and-so a present, or you forgot to invite them, or no matter what you've done or didn't do in the eyes of the world, you're still a child of God. No matter the darkness that you have lived in this year. It's like, I just want a holiday. I just want to forget about all of that. No matter the darkness you've lived in this year, you have a chance today to begin walking in the light. Light has come. No matter the chaos that you've been stirring up in your life, in your house, in your bank account, you can choose today to let the Prince of Peace come into your holiday season, into your life right now, and destroy the chaos, and knowing that Christ is enough. No matter what news you have heard from around the corner or around the world politically, no matter what depresses you this time of year that you might try to drown out with whatever tradition or drink or whatever way you get away from the world and have a holiday, no matter what news you've heard, you can know that one has come, that all of the government and all of the authority will rest on his shoulders. And no matter the weight you feel, the burden you carry, the anxiety you suffer from, the stronghold you've been enslaved to, no matter the darkness in this world, light has come. No matter the chaos that we have invited, unto us a child is born. No matter the mess of this world that we have created, unto us a son is given. I'm really terrible at wrapping gifts. Really bad, like epically bad. I always have like really good intentions. And I roll out the paper and I get the gift and I set it right in the middle and I think that I measure correctly and then I chop off the paper, right? And then I wrap it over and there's about 4 inches that I miscalculated. So I'm like, maybe I did it wrong. Maybe I just turned the thing this way and then it's even worse that way. So I turn it back this way. So then what do I have to do? You guys know what I should do is I should start over. But I don't. I tape that down and then I go back to the wrapping paper and I cut it off. And I put another piece. It's still not enough. And so then I go back to the wrapping paper to cut off just a little bit, but guess how much? I need this much, and there's only this much, so I need to go to another roll of wrapping paper that's different. And I've got tape, and I've got wrapping paper, and I've got bows, and I'm just keep on trying and trying and trying to wrap more and to do more and to get it around the corners and tape more down and whatever. And by the end, I have just an absolute chaotic mess of a present that nobody would want to open. They're like, is this some kind of cruel joke? And so what I've learned is like I can always start, and sometimes I'll get it if it's like a really small gift. But a lot of times I get to that point, I just get frustrated. I'd be like, how big are gift bags? Do they make them this big? Because, tissue paper covers a multitude of wrapping sins, right? And I'll just throw it in there. But what I've found is way more helpful is if I can just stop and look at my wife and go, can you do this for me? like this is your present, but can you wrap it? Because out of all of the beautiful presents under our tree right now, I don't want there to be like one thing that looks like I got you a dog that's trying to get out of the gift, right? We don't need that, and it's beautiful. She does such a great job, and she's so gracious with me, and so she wraps it up, and it looks absolutely perfect. And that got me thinking about all of the junk that we try to heap onto this holiday season, and all of the paper that we try to wrap over it, and all the things that we do to kind of guard our eyes and our face from the mess that the world is, when we could really just look to our Savior, the Prince of Peace, and go, can you do it? Can you make this perfect? Can you eliminate all of this chaos and do what you do what you came to do with the authority that you bring? And as he ascends into heaven, he says, all authority under heaven and earth has been given unto me. And we say, will you do it? Will you come and do what you came to do? Will you be the authority that has the authority to bind up and to eliminate and to eviscerate and to burn up and to eliminate the chaos that we have created, that has been in our world? Will you do it? Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for sending your son Jesus, the Sar of Shalom, into this Christmas season. Would we not shelter ourselves from the chaos of the world and the mess of the world, but worship in knowing that that is why Jesus had to come? God, as we take of the bread and of the blood this morning, God, as we take communion together, would we remember that this baby, born of a virgin, born in a stable, with no huge audience, with no resemblance that anyone would be drawn to him, but God, just this baby boy in a little town of Bethlehem would be the Prince of Peace, that would come to the chaos of our life, that would come to the storms and the tsunami that is inside of us and bring peace, not just to our world, but to the whole world. Come, Jesus. It's in your name we pray. Amen.